Dr. Sarah Chen had always believed that motherhood changed everything. Standing in the observation room of the Kepler station's xenobiology lab, watching the three small alien cubs huddle together in their containment unit, she felt that familiar protective instinct surge through her chest. The cubs were no bigger than house cats, covered in soft blue-gray fur with large, luminous eyes that seemed to hold too much intelligence for such young creatures. "The translation matrix is still working on their language," Dr. Marcus Webb said from behind her, his voice tight with exhaustion. They had been working for 18 hours straight since the rescue ship brought the cubs aboard. "But, from what we can tell, they're asking for their parents." Sarah pressed her palm against the transparent aluminum barrier. The cubs had been found floating in an escape pod, the only survivors of what appeared to be a massive ship explosion near the edge of Terran space. Their species was unknown to human databases, but their distress was universal. "Have we heard anything from the search teams?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer from Marcus's expression. "Negative. The debris field shows signs of complete structural failure. No life signs detected." Marcus rubbed his tired eyes. "These three are probably the only ones left." The largest of the cubs, barely the size of a small dog, approached the barrier where Sarah stood. It placed one tiny paw against the glass and made a sound that was part purr, part whimper. The universal translator crackled to life with a child's voice. "Are you my new mother?" Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She had lost her own daughter Emma 3 years ago to a transport accident, and the wound still felt fresh. But, looking into those trusting alien eyes, she felt something shift inside her chest. "I need to go in there," she said quietly. "Sarah, you know the protocols. First contact procedures require, look at them, Marcus." Sarah turned to face her colleague. "They're children. They're scared, alone, and traumatized. All our scans show they're not carrying any pathogens harmful to humans. Sometimes protocols need to take a back seat to basic compassion." Marcus stared at her for a long moment, then sighed. "If Director Vaughn finds out, let me worry about Vaughn." Sarah moved toward the airlock. "Run continuous medical scans on me. If anything looks wrong, seal the chamber immediately." The decontamination process felt like it took forever. Sarah watched through the chamber window as the three cubs pressed against the far wall, their large eyes tracking her every movement. When the inner door finally cycled open, she stepped inside and immediately knelt down to appear less threatening. "Hello, little ones," she said softly. The translator would handle the language conversion. The largest cub took a tentative step forward. "Mother creature? Are you here to help us?" "Yes, I'm here to help." Sarah extended her hand slowly, palm up. "My name is Sarah. What are your names?" The cub approached cautiously, sniffing at her hand before placing its small paw in her palm. "I am Cass. These are my nest siblings, Mira and June. Our ship home was broken by the bad metal things." Sarah felt her heart clench. The bad metal things were likely weapons of some kind. Someone had attacked these children's ship. "I'm sorry about your ship home. You're safe now." The other two cubs began to approach. Mira, the smallest, had what appeared to be bandages around her left arm, while June favored his right leg. They had been injured in whatever had destroyed their ship. "Are you going to take care of us until the grown-ups come back?" Cass asked with heartbreaking hope. Sarah exchanged a glance with the observation window where she could see Marcus watching intently. "How do you tell children that the grown-ups are never coming back?" "I'm going to take care of you," Sarah said instead. "For as long as you need me to." Over the next several hours, Sarah learned more about the cubs and their species. They were called the NYTH, from a small colony world called Nesthome in the Vale Nebula region. Their ship had been a family transport carrying about 200 individuals when it was attacked by what Kess described as ships with angry teeth. The more Sarah learned, the more her protective instincts flared. The NYTH were a peaceful species, technologically advanced but not militaristic. Their attackers had been raiders of some kind, pirates who had destroyed the ship after looting what they wanted. The escape pod had been damaged in the attack, which was why it had taken 3 days to reach human space.
Sarah.
Marcus's voice came through the comm system.
We're getting some concerning readings from long-range sensors. Multiple ships approaching our position.
They don't match any known human or allied configurations. Sarah looked down at the three cubs who had finally fallen asleep curled up against her legs. Kes had explained that NYTH Young needed physical contact with a guardian to feel secure, especially after trauma. Sarah had been more than willing to provide that comfort. "How long until they arrive?" she asked quietly, careful not to wake the children.
18 hours, maybe 20 if we're lucky.
Captain Rodriguez is already preparing the station for possible evacuation. Sarah felt cold dread settle in her stomach.
Do you think it's the same ones who attacked their ship? Unknown. But, given the timing and their trajectory, it's a distinct possibility. They might be tracking the escape pod. Sarah looked down at the sleeping cubs.
Kes had one tiny paw wrapped around her finger, as if afraid she might disappear.
These children had already lost everything once. She would not let them lose it again. Marcus, I need you to prepare the emergency shuttle in Bay 7. Load it with medical supplies and enough provisions for a week. Sarah, what are you thinking?
If those ships are here for the cubs, then we need to get them as far from here as possible. Sarah carefully shifted her position without waking the children. The shuttle can make it to Proxima Station if we push the engines hard. That's a 14-hour journey in a ship that's only rated for local transport. And you'd be flying directly toward the outer colonies where pirate activity is highest.
It's better than waiting here for them to arrive. Sarah's voice was firm. These children have already been through enough.
Marcus was quiet for several minutes.
I'll prep the shuttle. But, Sarah, if something happens to you out there,
then make sure the galaxy knows what happened here. Make sure someone remembers these cubs and what they've endured.
Sarah gently stroked Kes's soft fur.
Every species in this galaxy has the right to protect their children.
That includes us.
The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Sarah carefully moved the sleeping cubs to the medical bay where she could monitor their health during transport.
Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the station's pediatric specialist, insisted on coming along despite Sarah's protests.
"You'll need medical support if something goes wrong," Yuki said as she packed emergency medical supplies. "Besides, I didn't become a doctor to abandon children when they need help most." Captain Rodriguez provided them with the station's best emergency beacon and a quantum communicator with a direct link to Earth Command.
"If you run into trouble, activate the beacon immediately. We'll send everything we have."
As Sarah carried Mira to the shuttle, the small cub stirred and looked up at her with drowsy eyes.
"Mother Sarah? Where are we going?"
"Somewhere safe," Sarah whispered.
"Go back to sleep, little one." The shuttle bay doors sealed behind them as Sarah initiated the launch sequence. Through the viewports, she could see Kepler Station growing smaller as they moved away.
In the distance, space looked deceptively peaceful, filled with stars and the gentle glow of distant nebulae.
"Contact bearing 07 Mark IV, Yuki announced from the co-pilot seat.
Multiple ships, just like Marcus predicted.
Sarah adjusted their heading away from the approaching vessels.
The shuttle wasn't designed for combat or high-speed evasion, but it was small enough to avoid easy detection if they were careful.
"How long until they reach the station?" Sarah asked.
"At their current speed, about 6 hours.
Yuki checked her instruments. "But, Sarah, look at this." On the sensor display, more contacts were appearing. Not just the original group, but others approaching from different vectors. It wasn't a raid, it was a coordinated attack. They're not just after the cubs, Sarah realized. They're after the entire station.
The weight of that realization settled over both women. Kepler Station housed over 3,000 people, including families and children.
It was a research outpost, not a military installation. Its defenses were minimal.
"We have to warn them," Yuki said. Sarah was already activating the quantum communicator.
"Kepler Station, this is Emergency Shuttle 7. We're reading multiple hostile contacts approaching your position from various vectors.
This appears to be a coordinated assault. Marcus's voice crackled through the speakers.
Confirmed, Sarah. We're tracking at least 8 ships now.
Captain Rodriguez has issued evacuation orders, but we can't get everyone out in time. In the passenger compartment, Kes began to stir. The young NYTH had excellent hearing, and the tension in the adults' voices had awakened his protective instincts toward his younger nest siblings.
Mother Sarah? Kes appeared in the cockpit doorway. Are the bad metal things coming again? Sarah felt her heart break a little more.
These children had already endured so much trauma, and now they were about to witness more violence.
Yes, little one. But we're getting away from them. What about the other creatures on the big nest home? The ones who helped us? Sarah exchanged a glance with Yuki.
How do you explain to a child that sometimes good people get hurt by bad people, and there's nothing you can do to stop it? The other creatures are very strong and very smart, Sarah said carefully. They know how to take care of themselves. But, even as she said it, Sarah knew it wasn't entirely true. Research stations weren't equipped to handle military-grade pirate fleets. The people on Kepler Station were scientists, engineers, and support staff. They were good people doing important work, but they weren't soldiers.
Yuki, can you plot a course that takes us close to the Proxima Station defense grid? Sarah asked quietly.
That would add 4 hours to our journey and put us in range of the pirate ships for at least 30 minutes.
Do it anyway. If we can get a message to Proxima, they might be able to send help to Kepler.
Yuki began working on the new course calculations while Sarah monitored the approaching ships.
The closest group was moving fast, their energy signatures indicating heavily armed vessels.
These weren't desperate raiders looking for easy targets, they were professional military units with serious firepower.
Sarah, Kes said softly.
In my people's history songs, we have stories about creatures who stand between the darkness and the nest homes. They are called the Guardian Hearts. The songs say they are very rare, but when they appear, they change the fate of worlds.
Sarah knelt down to Kes's level. What do these Guardian Hearts do in the songs?
They protect what cannot protect itself. They choose to stand in the path of danger so others may live safely. Kes placed his small paw on Sarah's hand. I think you are a guardian heart, Mother Sarah. The simple faith in the child's voice nearly broke Sarah's composure. She had never thought of herself as particularly brave or heroic. She was a scientist who studied alien biology and tried to understand how different species could coexist peacefully. But, looking into Kes's trusting eyes, she felt something crystallize inside her chest. Maybe I am, she said softly.
And if that's true, then, I promise you that I will never let anyone hurt you or your nest siblings. The next hour passed in tense silence as they flew through open space toward the Proxima defense grid.
The pirate ships had reached Kepler Station, and communication with the research outpost had gone dark. Sarah tried not to think about what might be happening to her friends and colleagues.
Contact! Yuki suddenly announced. Single ship, moving to intercept our position.
Sarah's blood ran cold as she looked at the sensor readings. The ship was fast, heavily armed, and definitely not human in origin. Its energy signature matched the vessels that had attacked Kepler Station.
They've found us, Sarah said grimly.
In the passenger compartment, Mira and June began to make distressed sounds.
They could sense the adults' fear, and their own traumatic memories were being triggered.
Mother Sarah, Kes said, his voice small and frightened.
What do we do now? Sarah looked at the 3 small faces depending on her for protection.
The approaching ship was military-grade, designed for hunting and killing. Their shuttle was a civilian transport with no weapons and limited defensive capabilities.
By any rational calculation, they were about to die.
But, as Sarah looked at the cubs, she felt that protective instinct flare into something stronger. Something that burned bright and fierce in her chest. These children had already lost their families, their home, their entire world. They had been through enough trauma for several lifetimes.
Yuki, transfer all power to the engines. And send that message to Proxima Station now. Sarah, what are you planning? Sarah began strapping herself into the pilot's seat. Something probably very stupid.
But someone needs to make sure these cubs survive to grow up. The approaching ship was close enough now to begin weapons targeting. Sarah could see it on the viewscreen, a sleek, predatory vessel covered in aggressive angles and weapon ports. It looked like it had been designed specifically for causing fear and destruction. "Kes, I need you to take your nest siblings to the back of the shuttle and strap everyone into the emergency seats," Sarah said calmly. "Hold on tight and remember that I love you all very much." "Mother Sarah, you sound like you're saying goodbye." Sarah turned to look at the young NYTH one last time. His large eyes held understanding beyond his years, the terrible wisdom that comes from losing everything and learning to hope again. "Not goodbye," Sarah said softly. "Just until we meet again." The pirate ship opened fire. The first energy blast missed their shuttle by mere meters, its superheated plasma leaving a streak of ionized particles across their starboard side. Sarah threw the small vessel into a sharp diving turn, pushing the engines beyond their safety parameters as warning lights flashed across her control panel. Hull temperature rising, Yuki called out, her hands flying over the engineering controls. "We can't take many more near misses like that." In the passenger compartment, Sarah could hear Mira crying, a sound that cut through her heart like a blade. The little one was barely recovered from her injuries, and now she was experiencing terror all over again. Kes was trying to comfort his nest siblings, making soft crooning sounds that were typical of NYTH parental behavior. The pirate ship fired again, this time with multiple weapons simultaneously. Sarah rolled the shuttle hard to port, feeling the artificial gravity strain under the extreme maneuvers. One plasma bolt clipped their rear shields, causing the entire ship to shudder. "Sarah, I'm reading massive structural stress in the aft compartment," Yuki warned. "One more hit like that and we'll lose hull integrity." Sarah checked her instruments while pulling the shuttle through another evasive maneuver. The pirate ship was faster and more maneuverable than their transport, but it was also larger. If she could get them into the asteroid field, she'd spot it on long-range sensors. "Hold on, everyone," Sarah called out. "This is going to get rough." She dove toward the asteroid field at maximum velocity, the shuttle's hull groaning under the stress. The space between the floating rocks was narrow, barely wide enough for their ship to navigate safely. For their larger pursuer, it would be nearly impossible. The pirate vessel followed them into the field but was forced to reduce speed dramatically to avoid collision with the massive chunks of rock and ice. Sarah used every bit of her piloting training to thread the needle between asteroids, sometimes with only meters to spare on either side. "They're falling back," Yuki reported with relief. "They can't match our maneuverability in here." Sarah allowed herself one moment of hope before her sensors picked up new contacts. 3 more ships were approaching the asteroid field from different angles, moving to cut off any escape routes. "They were hurting us," Sarah realized with growing dread. This was planned. The communication system crackled to life with an alien voice speaking heavily accented standard. "Human transport vessel, you will cease evasive maneuvers and prepare for boarding. Surrender the NYTH juveniles and your deaths will be swift." Sarah's blood turned to ice. They weren't just random pirates, they were specifically hunting the cubs. Someone had put a bounty on these children, probably high enough to make tracking them across the galaxy worthwhile. "Unknown vessel," Sarah responded, "the children under my protection are refugees under Terran custody. Any attack on this ship constitutes an act of war against Earth." The alien's laughter was harsh and grating. "Earth is far from here, human. Your governments have no power in the outer regions. Surrender the cubs or watch your ship burn." Sarah cut the communication and turned to Yuki. "How long until we clear the asteroid field?" "At our current speed, 20 minutes. But, Sarah, they'll be waiting for us on the other side." "Then, we don't exit where they expect us to." Sarah began plotting a new course that would take them through the densest part of the field, where the asteroids were packed so tightly that even their shuttle would have trouble fitting through. "That's suicide," Yuki protested. "The navigation computers can't plot a safe course through that area." "Then, we'll have to fly it manually."
Sarah's hands were steady on the controls despite the magnitude of what she was suggesting. Computer navigation is too slow for spaces that tight.
But human reflexes and intuition might just be fast enough.
Yuki stared at her for a long moment. You're really going to try this? These cubs are counting on us. I won't let them down.
Sarah began the approach to the dense asteroid cluster, switching off the automatic collision avoidance systems that would prevent her from attempting such a dangerous maneuver. Every instinct she had screamed that this was madness, but looking back at the three small faces depending on her gave her the courage to continue. The first few minutes were manageable. Sarah had always been an excellent pilot, and her reflexes served her well as she guided the shuttle between rocks the size of buildings. But, as they moved deeper into the cluster, the spaces became narrower and the required reaction times faster. Collision alert, the computer announced calmly.
Recommend immediate course change.
Computer, shut up, Sarah muttered, rolling the shuttle through a gap so narrow that she could see scratches appearing on their hull plating. Behind them, the pirate ships had stopped pursuing. Even with their advanced technology, they weren't willing to risk following a small transport vessel through what amounted to a three-dimensional maze of death. They've stopped, Yuki reported. But, Sarah, they're moving to intercept us at all possible exit points.
When we come out of this field, they'll be waiting. Then, we don't come out where they expect.
Sarah was flying purely on instinct now, her conscious mind unable to process the split-second decisions required to navigate through the increasingly tight spaces.
What's on the other side of this asteroid field?
Yuki checked her star charts.
Empty space for about 6 light hours, then, the Proxima defense grid.
But, Sarah, even if we make it through, we'll never reach Proxima with those ships hunting us.
One problem at a time.
Sarah threaded the shuttle between two asteroids that were slowly rotating around each other, creating a gap that opened and closed in a predictable pattern.
We just need to survive the next 15 minutes.
In the passenger compartment, Kes appeared in the cockpit doorway again. Despite the danger and his own fear, his concern for the human adults was evident in his large eyes. Mother Sarah, your heart sound is very fast.
Are you frightened? Sarah spared a glance at the young NYTH. Yes, little one. I'm very frightened.
But sometimes being brave means doing what you need to do even when you're scared. The history songs say that guardian hearts feel fear like everyone else.
But they choose to act in spite of their fear because others need them to.
Kes placed his small paw on Sarah's shoulder.
You are definitely a guardian heart.
The simple faith in his voice gave Sarah strength as she guided them through another impossibly narrow passage. They were more than halfway through the dense cluster now, and somehow they were still alive. But the most difficult part was still ahead. Sarah, I'm showing massive gravitational anomalies ahead, Yuki warned.
There's something in the center of this asteroid field that's pulling everything toward it.
Sarah checked her sensors and felt her stomach drop. Hidden in the center of the asteroid cluster was a small black hole, its gravitational field gradually pulling all the surrounding matter into a slowly tightening spiral. They weren't just navigating through a static maze, they were flying through a cosmic whirlpool.
The pirates knew, Sarah realized.
They herded us into a trap.
This asteroid field isn't just dangerous, it's a gravity well. Even if we make it through, we'll be moving so fast that we won't be able to stop. What does that mean?
Kes asked, his young mind not fully grasping the implications.
Sarah looked at the child with a mixture of love and desperate determination.
It means we're going to go very, very fast. The gravitational acceleration was becoming noticeable now, pulling their shuttle toward the center of the field while simultaneously speeding up their forward velocity. Sarah had to constantly adjust their course to avoid being drawn into a fatal spiral, but each correction cost them precious fuel and brought them closer to the point of no return. Hull stress is approaching critical levels, Yuki reported, her voice tight with controlled panic. The gravitational shear is literally pulling us apart. Sarah could feel it in the way the shuttle responded to her controls, a sluggishness that indicated structural damage. But they were so close to clearing the field. If they could just hold together for another few minutes. An alarm klaxon suddenly filled the cockpit. Critical hull breach detected, the computer announced.
Emergency procedures activated. Where? Sarah demanded. Passenger compartment, Section 4. Atmospheric breach in progress. Sarah's heart stopped.
Section 4 was where she had told the cubs to strap themselves in for safety.
Emergency containment fields? Failing. Hull breach expanding. Without hesitation, Sarah engaged the autopilot and unbuckled herself from the pilot's seat.
Yuki, take the controls.
Get us out of this field. Sarah, what are you doing? What I have to do.
Sarah was already moving toward the rear of the shuttle.
Those children are not dying on my watch.
The passenger compartment was in chaos. Emergency lights flashed red as atmosphere bled out through a jagged tear in the hull plating. The three cubs were still strapped into their seats, but Mira was unconscious and June was struggling to breathe in the thinning air. Sarah grabbed an emergency patch kit and began working to seal the breach, but the gravitational stress was making the tear larger faster than she could repair it. She needed to do something dramatic to buy them time.
Looking around the compartment, Sarah spotted the emergency airlock manual override.
It was designed to allow crew members to create an improvised airlock in case of catastrophic hull failure. But using it would mean sealing herself on the wrong side of the breach.
Kes, Sarah called to the eldest cub, can you understand me?
The young NYTH nodded weakly, his breathing labored but still conscious.
I need you to watch your nest siblings. When I tell you to, press the green button on that panel.
It will seal the emergency bulkhead and stop the air from escaping.
What about you, Mother Sarah?
Sarah looked into his trusting eyes and felt her heart break.
I'll be fine.
I just need to fix something from out here first.
It wasn't entirely a lie.
There was a small chance she could survive in the breach area long enough for Yuki to get them to safety. A very small chance. Sarah began working with desperate efficiency, using her own body to block the worst of the atmospheric leak while she applied structural patches to the hull. The cold of space was already seeping through her clothing, and she could feel the pressure drop affecting her breathing. Now, Kes, she shouted. The emergency bulkhead slammed shut just as Sarah finished applying the last structural patch. She was now trapped in a small space between the hull breach and the sealed compartment, with maybe 10 minutes of air if she was lucky. But the cubs were safe. The main passenger compartment was sealed and pressurized. Mira was already beginning to stir as her oxygen levels returned to normal.
Sarah.
Yuki's voice came through the emergency communicator. We're clear of the asteroid field, but I'm reading massive damage to your section. Cubs, safe? Sarah asked, her breathing becoming difficult as the cold and pressure drop began to affect her more severely.
They're fine. All three showing normal vital signs. But, Sarah, you need to get back in here.
I'm reading dangerous exposure levels in your area. Sarah tried to respond but found that she couldn't form words properly. The extreme cold was making her clumsy, and she could feel consciousness beginning to slip away from her. Through the small viewport in the emergency bulkhead, she could see Kes pressing his paw against the transparent aluminum, his large eyes filled with understanding and grief. The little NYTH mouthed words that the universal translator couldn't process through the sealed barrier, but Sarah didn't need a translation. She could read the meaning in his expression. Thank you, Guardian Heart. As darkness closed in around her, Sarah felt a profound sense of peace. The cubs were alive. They would make it to safety. Whatever happened to her now, she had kept her promise to protect them. The last thing she saw before unconsciousness took her was the warm glow of stars outside the shuttle, beautiful and eternal and welcoming. When Sarah Chin died in the cold vacuum between hull breaches, her final thought was not of her own mortality, but of three small faces that would now have a chance to grow up safe and loved. In the end, that seemed like a fair trade. But death, as it turned out, was not the end of Sarah's story.
It was only the beginning. The first sensation that penetrated the darkness was warmth.
Not the gentle warmth of sunlight or a comfortable room, but an odd, artificial heat that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once.
Sarah's consciousness swam toward it like a drowning person reaching for the surface.
The second sensation was a rhythmic beeping that gradually resolved into what she recognized as medical monitoring equipment. But the pitch and cadence were wrong, as if the machines had been designed for ears that heard frequencies differently than human ones. The third sensation was the strangest of all. She was alive when she knew she should be dead. Sarah tried to open her eyes but found that her eyelids felt impossibly heavy. She attempted to move her hands and discovered that they were restrained not with bonds or straps, but with something that felt more like supportive braces. "The human consciousness is returning," a voice said in accented standard. "Increase the neural stabilization field by 12%.
Confirmed, another voice responded.
Cardiovascular function remains steady. The repair work on the cardiac tissue was successful." Sarah managed to force her eyes open and immediately regretted it. The light in the room was too bright and seemed to come from panels covering the entire ceiling. As her vision adjusted, she began to make out shapes moving around what appeared to be a medical facility. The beings attending to her were tall and slender, with elongated limbs and heads that seemed slightly too large for their bodies. Their skin had a pale, almost translucent quality, and their eyes were larger than human proportions but not as dramatically oversized as the NYTH cubs she remembered. "Where?" Sarah tried to speak but discovered that her throat felt raw and strange.
"Do not attempt to vocalize yet," one of the beings said, approaching her bedside.
"Your respiratory system required extensive reconstruction. The damage from vacuum exposure was considerable." Memory came flooding back in painful clarity. The asteroid field. The hull breach. Sealing the cubs in the safe compartment while she remained behind to fix the breach.
Dying in the cold vacuum of space while ensuring their survival. The cubs, Sarah managed to croak despite the alien doctor's advice.
Kes.
Mira.
June. The NYTH juveniles are safe, the alien assured her. They were recovered along with your remains and brought to this facility for medical evaluation. When we discovered that human neural tissue retains viability longer than previously documented, we made the decision to attempt resurrection protocols.
Sarah stared at the alien doctor, trying to process what she was hearing. Resurrection protocols?
Your species is quite remarkable, another alien said, moving to join the first at her bedside. Most organic beings suffer irreversible neural degradation within moments of cardiac cessation.
But human consciousness appears to linger in the neural matrix for far longer than should be biologically possible.
This allowed us to repair your body and restore brain function.
You brought me back from the dead.
Sarah's voice was getting stronger, though it still sounded strange to her ears. Technically, you were never entirely dead, the first alien corrected.
Dying, yes.
But your neural patterns remained active on a quantum level for nearly 7 hours after clinical death.
This is unprecedented among carbon-based lifeforms.
Sarah tried to sit up but found that her body wasn't responding the way she expected. Looking down at herself, she could see that she was wearing some kind of medical gown, but there were additional devices attached to various parts of her body: monitors, stabilizers, and what appeared to be small mechanical assists for basic bodily functions. "How long?" she asked. "You have been unconscious for 43 standard days," the alien doctor replied. "The reconstruction process was complex. Your species' biological systems are more intricate than our initial scans indicated."
"I want to see them."
The cubs. The two aliens exchanged what might have been glances, though their facial expressions were difficult for Sarah to read. "That may not be advisable at this time," the second alien said carefully. "Your physical condition, while stable, remains fragile. Additionally, there are complications regarding the political situation surrounding the NYTH juveniles."
"What kind of complications?"
Sarah's protective instincts immediately flared to life, giving her strength she didn't know she possessed. "The attack on your transport shuttle and the Kepler station was part of a larger conflict," the first alien explained.
"The species responsible call themselves the Koroth Syndicate."
"They are a militant organization that considers the NYTH to be valuable as slave labor due to their exceptional intelligence and small stature." Sarah felt cold fury building in her chest.
They're hunting children for slavery.
The Korath have placed significant bounties on any surviving NYTH refugees. The cubs under your protection are worth approximately 50 million credits on the black market.
Over my dead body.
You were dead, the second alien pointed out with what might have been humor.
And, yet here you are. Perhaps being deceased is not the deterrent you believe it to be. Despite everything, Sarah almost smiled at that.
Who are you people?
Why did you save me? We are the Healer Collective, the first alien replied.
Our species, the Zephyrians, are dedicated to preserving life wherever possible. When we detected the distress signal from your shuttle and discovered the situation, we felt obligated to intervene.
The cubs sent a distress signal?
Your colleague, Dr. Tanaka, managed to activate the emergency beacon before the shuttle's power failed. We arrived approximately 6 hours after your clinical death.
Sarah felt relief wash over her. Yuki had survived. That was something, at least. Where is Dr. Tanaka now? Again, the aliens exchanged uncertain looks.
She is recovering in another wing of this facility, the first alien said carefully. However, she has been vocal in her demands to see you. And the cubs have been equally insistent about speaking with their mother Sarah.
Then, why won't you let us see each other? Because, the second alien said quietly, the Korath Syndicate has tracked the distress signal to this location.
They are currently demanding that we surrender both you and the cubs under threat of destroying this entire medical facility. Sarah felt her blood pressure spike, triggering alarms on the medical monitors around her bed.
How many people are in this facility?
Approximately 12,000 patients and medical staff across all species, the first alien replied. Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to control the rage and helplessness threatening to overwhelm her. She had died protecting those cubs, and somehow even death hadn't been enough to keep them safe.
I need to see them, she said firmly.
And I need to speak with whoever is in charge of this facility. Sarah Chen, the first alien said, and there was something almost reverent in the way it spoke her name. You should understand that your actions in protecting the NYTH cubs have not gone unnoticed. Word of your sacrifice has spread throughout the Healer Collective and beyond. There are many species who now speak of the human who chose death over abandoning children of another species.
I didn't do anything special, Sarah protested. Any decent person would have done the same thing.
No, the second alien said quietly.
They would not have.
And that is why your story has become significant. The galaxy has watched humans for decades, wondering what kind of species you truly are.
Your actions have provided an answer.
Sarah didn't fully understand what the alien meant, but she could hear sounds in the corridor outside her room, voices speaking in languages she didn't recognize, but with emotional tones that seemed almost respectful.
What's happening out there? Representatives from 17 different species have requested an audience with you, the first alien explained.
The story of your sacrifice has resonated strongly with many cultures, particularly those with strong parental protection instincts.
I just want to make sure the cubs are safe.
And, perhaps, the second alien said, that desire might be the key to ensuring not just their safety, but the safety of all refugees fleeing the Korath Syndicate.
Sarah looked between the two doctors, sensing that they knew something she didn't. What aren't you telling me? The first alien moved closer to her bedside. Sarah Chen, what you did in that shuttle has started something. A coalition is forming species who believe that the Koratha's hunting of refugees must be stopped.
They are calling it the Guardian Protocol, in honor of your actions. But they want to meet with me first, the second alien continued. To understand what drives humans to such extremes of protective behavior. Some species are wondering if humanity might be willing to take a more active role in protecting refugee populations throughout the galaxy. Sarah stared at them, beginning to understand the implications. Her simple act of protecting 3 orphan children had somehow escalated into a potential galactic political movement.
The cubs, she said again. I need to see them first.
Before I talk to anyone else about anything else, I need to know that Kes, Mira, and June are truly safe. The aliens looked at each other one more time, then, the first one nodded.
Very well.
But, you should know that they have questions about your return from death. The NYTH have legends about such things, and they may react to you differently than you expect.
Different how?
In NYTH culture, the second alien explained, beings who die protecting the innocent and, then, return to life are considered to be blessed by the cosmic forces of creation. They call such individuals eternal guardians.
You mean they think I'm some kind of religious figure now?
Not exactly, the first alien said.
More like a living legend. A mythical being made real.
Sarah groaned softly. All she had wanted was to keep 3 scared children safe.
Now apparently she was some kind of galactic folk hero. This is going to complicate things, isn't it?
Oh yes, both aliens said simultaneously.
Very much so.
The walk to the Cubs' quarters felt like the longest journey of Sarah's life. Despite the Zephyrian medical technology that had essentially rebuilt her from the cellular level up, she still felt weak and unsteady. The mechanical assists helped her move, but every step reminded her that she was not quite the same person who had died in that shuttle breach. Dr. Yuki was waiting outside the Cubs' room when Sarah arrived, her face lighting up with joy and relief when she saw her friend approaching.
Sarah!
Yuki rushed forward but stopped short when she saw the medical devices still attached to Sarah's body.
My God, when I saw you floating in that compartment,
I thought I'd lost you forever.
You did lose me, Sarah said softly. But, apparently death isn't as permanent as we thought. They embraced carefully, both women fighting back tears.
Sarah could see that Yuki had been through her own trauma, there were healing marks on her face and arms, and she moved with the careful precision of someone still recovering from serious injuries. The Cubs, Sarah said urgently.
Are they really okay?
See for yourself.
Yuki gestured toward the door.
But, Sarah, you should know that they've changed since your death.
Especially Cass. Changed how? They've become much more mature. Almost overnight.
The Zephyrians say it's a normal NYTH response to extreme trauma. They can essentially force their mental development to accelerate when survival demands it.
Sarah felt a pang of sadness.
These children had already been forced to grow up too fast, and her death had robbed them of even more of their childhood. The door slid open with a soft whisper, revealing a room that had been carefully designed to mimic a NYTH nest environment. Soft, warm lighting emanated from fixtures built into the walls, and the furniture was sized and shaped for small beings who preferred to curl up together for comfort. All 3 Cubs were present, but Sarah barely recognized them. In the 43 days since her death, they had grown considerably. Kes was now nearly the size of a human toddler, while Mira and June were not far behind. Their fur had deepened in color and developed adult patterns, and their eyes held an intelligence that seemed far beyond their chronological age. Mother Sarah, Kes said quietly, his voice noticeably deeper than before.
You have returned to us.
There was no surprise in his tone, no childish excitement. He spoke with the solemnity of someone who had witnessed profound mysteries and accepted them as part of the natural order.
Hello, little ones, Sarah said, kneeling down to their level despite the protest from her mechanical assists. I've missed you so much.
Mira and June approached cautiously, their large eyes studying Sarah with an intensity that made her slightly uncomfortable. They were looking at her as if they were seeing something beyond the physical form she presented. You smell different, Mira observed.
Like the metal healing machines and the deep cold between stars. Your life song has new harmonies, June added. Notes that were not there before your death time.
Sarah glanced at Yuki, who shrugged helplessly.
The Zephyrians say that NYTH children have senses that adult humans don't possess.
They can detect things on quantum and subatomic levels.
What do you sense? Sarah asked the Cubs directly.
Kes stepped forward and placed his small hand on Sarah's chest, directly over her heart.
Your heart song has 2 rhythms now.
One that belongs to this life, and one that remembers the time between deaths.
You are both Sarah who was and Sarah who returned.
The legends speak of such beings, Mira said softly. Those who cross the void between and come back carry pieces of eternity within them. You are an eternal guardian now, June concluded.
Like in the ancient stories our parent singers taught us. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the weight of their expectations.
These children were looking at her as if she were some mythical figure from their cultural legends, when all she felt was tired and confused and grateful to be alive.
I'm still just Sarah, she said gently.
I'm still the same person who took care of you on the shuttle. No, Kes said with quiet certainty.
You are Sarah and more. We can see the light threads that connect you to the deep spaces now. You died for us, and the universe has marked you as a guardian heart. Before Sarah could respond, an alarm began sounding throughout the facility.
The soft, pulsing tone was clearly designed not to cause panic, but it carried an unmistakable note of urgency.
Dr. Zephi, the lead Zephyrian physician, appeared in the doorway with obvious concern on his elongated features.
Sarah Chen, your presence is requested in the command center immediately. The Korath ships have begun approaching the station.
Sarah's protective instincts immediately activated. How long until they arrive? Approximately 4 hours. But there is a complication. Long-range sensors indicate they are not alone.
Sarah struggled to her feet, ignoring the protests from her medical equipment.
What do you mean, not alone?
It appears that word of your resurrection has spread beyond the Healer Collective.
Multiple fleets are converging on this location. Some are hostile, others claim to be offering protection.
The situation is becoming quite complex. Kes moved to stand beside Sarah, his young face set with determination that seemed far beyond his years. Mother Sarah, if you are truly an eternal guardian, then this is the moment the universe has prepared you for.
Kes, you're still a child. This isn't your responsibility.
We are cubs no longer, Mira said, moving to Sarah's other side. The death time and the growth change have made us young adults by NYTH standards.
We choose to stand with you.
The Nest songs say that eternal guardians do not walk their paths alone, June added, completing what was clearly a unified decision by the three siblings. They gather families of choice who share their purpose. Sarah looked down at the three young NYTH and felt her heart swell with a mixture of pride and terror. They had indeed grown up, forced into maturity by circumstances beyond their control. But they were still young, still vulnerable, and she was still responsible for their safety.
Dr. Zephi, I need to understand the tactical situation before I make any decisions, Sarah said. What exactly are we facing?
Perhaps it would be better if you saw for yourself.
The Zephyrian physician gestured toward the corridor.
The command center has full sensor data from all approaching fleets. The walk through the medical facility revealed just how much Sarah's story had already impacted the galactic community. Beings from dozens of different species lined the corridors, many of them injured refugees who had fled their homeworlds ahead of various conflicts. As Sarah passed, she heard whispered conversations in languages she didn't recognize, but the tone was unmistakable. These people saw her as a symbol of hope.
This is getting out of hand, Sarah murmured to Yuki as they walked.
It started getting out of hand the moment you chose to die for those cubs, Yuki replied quietly. The galaxy has been watching humanity for decades, trying to figure out what kind of species we really are.
Your actions gave them their answer. What answer is that? That humans will literally die for children that aren't even their own species.
Yuki's voice carried a note of awe.
Do you have any idea how rare that is in galactic history?
The command center was a massive room filled with holographic displays showing the space around the medical station. Sarah counted at least 15 different fleets approaching from various directions, each representing different species and political factions. The red contacts are confirmed hostile, Commander Veltar explained as Sarah approached the central display. The Zephyrian military officer was tall even by his species standards, with the kind of bearing that suggested extensive combat experience. The Korath Syndicate has assembled a significant force: 8 heavy cruisers and approximately 40 support vessels.
What about the others? Sarah asked, studying the complex tactical display. Mixed intentions. The blue contacts represent the Altarian Defense Force, who claim they are here to protect refugees under the Guardian Protocol.
The green contacts are from the Centauri Federation, who appear to be offering military assistance.
And the yellow ones? Commander Veltar's expression darkened.
Unknown species, but their ships are broadcasting surrender demands in multiple languages. They want the Guardian human to submit to their authority for galactic evaluation. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine.
Galactic evaluation?
Some species appear to believe that your resurrection makes you either a powerful weapon or a dangerous anomaly that must be controlled, Dr. Zethai explained. The political ramifications of your unique status are still being debated in various governing councils across the galaxy. Kes tugged at Sarah's medical gown to get her attention.
Mother Sarah, the Nest songs speak of times when guardian hearts must choose between hiding in safety or standing openly against the darkness. The universe is asking you to choose.
Sarah looked around the command center at the assembled beings, Zephyrians, humans, and several other species she didn't recognize. All of them were looking at her with expressions that ranged from hope to desperate fear. The weight of their expectations was almost crushing.
How many refugees are currently at this facility? She asked Commander Veltar.
Approximately 8,000, representing 23 different species.
Most are fleeing conflicts in their home systems.
This facility is one of the largest neutral medical stations in this sector.
And if the Korath attack?
Our defenses are designed to protect against raiders and small military forces. We cannot withstand an assault by 8 heavy cruisers. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to think clearly despite the overwhelming nature of the situation. 8,000 innocent beings were counting on the decisions she made in the next few hours. 3 young NYTH who had already suffered too much were looking to her for guidance. And, somehow her simple act of maternal protection had evolved into a galactic political crisis.
What are our options? She asked.
We could evacuate the most critical patients to the Allied ships, Commander Veltar suggested. But, the logistics of moving 8,000 beings would take days, and we don't have days. We could attempt diplomatic negotiations with the Korath, Dr. Zethai added. Though their previous communications suggest they have little interest in peaceful resolution. Or, a new voice said from the back of the command center, we could give them what they want.
Sarah turned to see a human woman approaching, someone she didn't recognize, wearing the uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps.
The woman was middle-aged with graying hair and the kind of confident bearing that suggested high-level political experience.
Ambassador Chen, the woman said, extending her hand. Elizabeth Morrison, Earth's special envoy to the outer colonies. I've been following your situation with great interest.
I'm not an ambassador, Sarah replied, shaking the offered hand.
I'm just a xenobiologist who tried to protect some children.
You became an ambassador the moment you died for those children, Morrison replied firmly.
Whether you want the title or not, you now represent humanity to the entire galaxy. The question is, what kind of representation do you want to provide?
What do you mean, give them what they want?
The Korath claim they only want the 3 NYTH cubs. If we surrender the children, they've indicated they will withdraw without attacking the station.
Sarah felt rage explode in her chest so powerfully that her medical monitors began shrieking warnings.
Absolutely not.
Sarah, I understand your emotional attachment, but we need to consider the greater good.
8,000 lives versus 3, no.
Sarah's voice carried a finality that made everyone in the command center stop what they were doing and look at her.
Those children are under my protection. I already died for them once.
I am not going to hand them over to slavers just to make a diplomatic problem go away. Sarah, Morrison said more gently, I know this is difficult, but sometimes leadership requires making impossible choices. Leadership requires standing for principles that matter more than convenience, Sarah interrupted.
If we surrender those cubs to save ourselves, what does that say about humanity? What does it say about any of us? Kes stepped forward and took Sarah's hand in his small paw. Mother Sarah speaks truth.
The Nest songs teach that a species which abandons its young for safety has already chosen its own extinction.
The cubs aren't even human, Morrison pointed out.
That, Sarah said quietly, is exactly the point. If we only protect those who share our DNA, we're no better than the Korath. Mira and June moved to flank their older sibling, presenting a united front despite their youth.
"We choose to stand with Mother Sarah," Mira announced.
"If death comes, we will face it with dignity rather than live as slaves."
"You're asking me to risk 8,000 lives for 3 children," Morrison said desperately.
"I'm asking you to trust that there might be a third option," Sarah replied.
"Commander Veltar, how long until the first hostile ships arrive?"
3 hours, 47 minutes.
"And how long would it take to get a message to all the approaching fleets?"
"Immediate broadcast to all vessels would take approximately 12 minutes to propagate across the local communication networks." Sarah looked around the command center one more time, taking in the faces of beings from multiple species who had come to this place seeking healing and safety.
The decision crystallizing in her mind felt both terrifying and absolutely right.
"I want to speak to all of them," she said firmly. "Every ship, every fleet, every species represented in this system. If they want to meet the human who came back from the dead, then I'll give them that opportunity." "Sarah, that could be extremely dangerous," Dr. Zephi warned.
"Some of those species may have hostile intentions toward you personally."
"Maybe. But, right now, everyone is operating on assumptions about what humanity represents. It's time they heard the truth directly."
Ambassador Morrison looked skeptical. "What truth is that?"
Sarah squeezed Kessa's small hand and felt strength flow back into her from the simple contact. "That humanity doesn't abandon family, no matter how small, no matter how different, no matter how dangerous it becomes to protect them."
"You're going to try to shame an entire pirate fleet into withdrawing?" Morrison asked incredulously.
"No," Sarah said with growing confidence. "I'm going to remind everyone in this system what we're all supposed to be fighting for in the first place." Commander Veltar straightened to attention.
"What are your orders, Guardian?"
The title sent a shock through Sarah, but she found that it felt right somehow. She had been changed by death and resurrection, marked by sacrifice and love. If the galaxy needed a guardian, then perhaps that was what she had become.
"Open a channel to all ships," Sarah commanded.
"And prepare to broadcast on all frequencies.
It's time for a conversation that's been 43 days overdue."
As the communication systems activated, Sarah felt the weight of 8,000 lives settling on her shoulders. But she also felt the strength of 3 small hands holding hers, and the knowledge that sometimes the right choice was also the hardest choice.
The galaxy was about to learn something important about humanity.
She just hoped they were ready to hear it.
"All channels open, Guardian," Commander Veltar reported.
"You're broadcasting to approximately 200 ships representing 47 different species." Sarah took a deep breath and began to speak, her words carrying across the void to beings she had never met but who would judge her species by what she said next. "My name is Sarah Chen," she began, her voice steady and clear. "I'm a xenobiologist from Earth, and I died protecting 3 children who are not of my species. I was brought back to life by the compassion of beings who barely knew me, and now I find myself at the center of a conflict that threatens thousands of innocent lives." She paused, looking down at Kess, Mira, and June, who were listening with the solemn attention of beings far older than their years. "I want to tell you a story," Sarah continued, "about what it means to be a guardian, and what it should mean to be part of a galactic community that calls itself civilized." In the depths of space around the medical station, ships from dozens of species listened in silence as the human who had conquered death began to speak about love, sacrifice, and the courage required to stand between darkness and innocence. What she said next would reshape the political landscape of 3 sectors and establish humanity's role in galactic affairs for generations to come. But first, she had to save the lives of 8,000 refugees and 3 small cubs who had already endured far too much pain for being so young. The fate of worlds hung in the balance of her next words. Sarah's voice carried across the communication channels to hundreds of ships, reaching beings who had traveled from across the galaxy to witness what many were already calling the Guardian Incident. Her words were translated into dozens of languages, but the emotional weight behind them needed no translation. 43 days ago, I was a simple research scientist studying how different species might learn to coexist peacefully, Sarah continued. I had never fired a weapon in anger, never served in any military capacity, never considered myself particularly brave or heroic. I was just someone who believed that knowledge and understanding could make the galaxy a better place for everyone. In the command center around her, Sarah could see displays showing ship movements throughout the system. Some vessels were holding their positions, while others were slowly adjusting course, though whether toward or away from the medical station was still unclear. Then, I met 3 children whose world had been destroyed by those who saw profit in suffering. Kes, Mira, and June were orphan refugees whose only crime was belonging to a species that others wanted to enslave. When our ship was attacked, I had a choice to make. Sarah felt Kes squeeze her hand encouragingly. The young NYTH's eyes held a wisdom that seemed impossible for someone so recently a child, but Sarah drew strength from his quiet confidence. I could have tried to save myself. I could have rationalized that my own survival was more important than the lives of 3 alien children. I could have told myself that someone else would take responsibility, that there would be other opportunities to help, that preserving my own life served some greater good. Across the communication channels, Sarah could hear the subtle sounds of ships holding position, weapons systems standing down, engines reducing power. Her words were creating a moment of stillness in what had been rapidly escalating toward violence. Instead, I chose to seal myself in a breached compartment so that 3 children could continue breathing. I chose to die so that they could live. And, in that moment of choice, I discovered something about humanity that I had never fully understood before. Commander Veltar quietly reported that several of the previously hostile fleets were requesting permission to approach the station under peaceful intentions. The yellow-coated ships, the ones demanding her surrender for evaluation, had stopped their advance and seemed to be reconsidering their position. We are not the strongest species in this galaxy, Sarah continued. We are not the most technologically advanced, not the most numerous, not the most intelligent by many measures. But we have something that I believe makes us valuable members of the galactic community. We have an instinctive understanding that family is not defined by genetics. Ambassador Morrison moved closer to the communication console, her earlier skepticism replaced by growing understanding of what Sarah was attempting to accomplish. When I chose to protect those cubs, I was not making a calculated decision based on political alliances or economic interests. I was responding to the simple truth that when you see children in danger, you protect them. When you see the innocent threatened by the predatory, you stand in the way. When you see cruelty trying to triumph over compassion, you choose to be the barrier that prevents that triumph. Dr. Zephi approached Sarah with a medical scanner, checking her vital signs as she spoke. The emotional intensity of the broadcast was putting strain on her still healing systems, but Sarah waved away his concerns. Now I am told that my death and resurrection have made me some kind of symbol. That species across the galaxy are looking to humanity for leadership in establishing new protocols for protecting refugees and preventing the kinds of atrocities that orphaned these cubs in the first place. Sarah paused, looking around the command center at the faces of beings from multiple species who had found refuge at this medical station. Each face represented a story of loss and hope, of beings who had fled their homes seeking safety and healing. I want you all to understand something very clearly, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. I did not come back from the dead to become anyone's weapon. I did not survive death to serve as a tool for political manipulation or military conquest. I returned to life for one simple reason: to continue protecting those who cannot protect themselves. On the tactical displays, Sarah could see that the Korath fleet was still approaching, but their formation had become less aggressive. Several of their support ships had actually reduced speed, creating gaps in what had been a coordinated assault formation. To the Korath Syndicate, I say this: you will not have these children. You will not turn them into slaves. You will not profit from their suffering. If you want to reach them, you will have to go through me first. And I have already proven that death will not stop me from standing in your way. Mira stepped forward and placed her small hand on the communication console. When she spoke, her young voice was transmitted alongside Sarah's. My name is Mira of the NYTH, the cub said with remarkable composure. The humans call me a refugee, but I choose to call myself a survivor. My nest parents died protecting our world. Guardian Mother Sarah died protecting my siblings and me. Now we stand together as family by choice rather than family by birth. June moved to join his sister at the console. I am June of the NYTH. We do not ask the galaxy to pity us or to treat us as helpless victims. We ask only for the right to grow up free, to honor the memory of those who died protecting us, and to become the kind of beings who will stand between darkness and innocence when our time comes. Finally, Kes approached the communication system. Despite his youth, he carried himself with the dignity of a clan leader addressing his people. I am Kes of the NYTH, eldest of the survivors of the ship Harmony's dream, he said formally. In our darkest hour, when death had claimed our guardian mother Sarah, we learned that the universe sometimes returns those who die for love. Guardian Mother Sarah is now marked by eternity as an eternal guardian, and we are honored to be her chosen family. Sarah felt tears running down her cheeks as she listened to these remarkable children speak with such courage and maturity. They had been forced to grow up far too quickly, but they had grown into beings of incredible strength and wisdom. The nest songs of our people speak of moments when the galaxy stands at a crossroads, Kes continued. When the choices made by a few determine the fate of many. Guardian Mother Sarah has shown us that when such moments arise, there are beings willing to sacrifice everything for the principle that the innocent deserve protection. Ambassador Morrison stepped forward to address the assembled fleets. This is Ambassador Elizabeth Morrison of the Earth Diplomatic Corps. I want to formally announce that the Terran government recognizes Sarah Chen as humanity's first official guardian, with full diplomatic authority to negotiate on behalf of Earth in matters relating to refugee protection and interspecies cooperation. Sarah stared at Morrison in shock. She had not been consulted about this appointment, and she wasn't sure she wanted such a massive responsibility. Furthermore, Morrison continued, Earth hereby offers formal asylum to any refugee fleeing persecution, slavery, or genocide, regardless of species. We invite the galactic community to work with us in establishing formal protocols for refugee protection that will prevent tragedies like the one that orphaned these cubs. Commander Veltar announced that responses were beginning to come in from the assembled fleets. The Altarian Defense Force is requesting permission to establish a permanent patrol base in this system to provide ongoing protection for the medical station. The Centauri Federation is offering to contribute ships and personnel to a new refugee protection force. What about the Korath? Sarah asked. Their fleet has stopped approaching. They appear to be holding position at the edge of the system, presumably discussing their options. Dr. Yuki moved to stand beside Sarah. Whatever you say next is going to determine whether this ends peacefully or whether we're about to be in the middle of the largest space battle this sector has seen in decades. Sarah looked down at the three cubs who had started this entire situation by being in the wrong place at the wrong time when evil people decided to destroy their world. They were looking up at her with complete trust, absolute faith that she would find a way to keep them safe. To all ships and all species currently in this system, Sarah said, her voice carrying new authority, I want to propose something unprecedented. Instead of fighting over who has the right to determine the fate of 3 children, let's create something that ensures no child ever has to face what these cubs have endured. The communication channels filled with the subtle sounds of hundreds of beings holding their breath. I propose the establishment of the Guardian Protocol, a formal galactic treaty that recognizes the absolute right of any being to protect children of any species from harm, slavery, or exploitation. This protocol would supersede territorial boundaries, political affiliations, and economic interests. Sarah could see excitement building on Commander Veltar's face as he monitored the responses coming in from various fleets. Furthermore, I propose the creation of Guardian stations throughout the galaxy, neutral territories where refugees can find safety and healing, protected by multinational forces representing all member species. These stations would be funded jointly and governed by representatives chosen for their commitment to protecting the innocent rather than advancing political agendas. Ambassador Morrison was frantically taking notes, clearly recognizing the historical significance of what Sarah was proposing. Any species that signs this protocol agrees to treat attacks on children or refugees as acts of war against all member species. Any organization that profits from slavery or exploitation of the innocent will face the combined military might of the galactic community. The communication channels erupted with responses from dozens of species. Most were expressing support or requesting more detailed information about implementation. But Sarah was watching the tactical display, waiting to see how the Korath fleet would respond to her ultimatum.
And, to the Korath Syndicate specifically, Sarah said, her voice hardening, I offer you one opportunity to withdraw from this system peacefully.
Take your ships, return to whatever dark corner of the galaxy spawned you, and never again threaten these children or any other innocent beings. This is not a negotiation.
This is a choice between continued existence and the alternative. For several long minutes, silence filled the communication channels.
The only sounds in the command center were the quiet hums of medical equipment and the soft breathing of beings holding their collective breath. Then, Commander Veltar's voice cut through the tension.
Korath lead ship is transmitting. Audio only.
The voice that filled the command center was harsh and guttural, speaking heavily accented standard with obvious contempt. Human creature, you speak boldly for one so recently dead.
The Korath do not fear your empty threats.
Then, you are making a mistake that will cost you everything, Sarah replied calmly.
You have 8 heavy cruisers against your single medical station. What possible threat could you pose to our fleet?
Sarah smiled, and there was something in that expression that made even the Zephyrians take a step back.
You're not fighting a medical station.
You're fighting the combined fleets of 47 species who have just heard me offer them something they've wanted for centuries, a legitimate reason to hunt pirates to extinction. The silence that followed stretched for nearly 30 seconds.
You would risk galactic war over 3 alien cubs? The Korath commander finally asked.
No, Sarah said quietly. I would risk galactic war to establish the principle that there are some things more important than avoiding conflict.
The safety of children is one of those things.
Another long pause, then, the Korath commander's voice returned, but now it held a note of uncertainty.
We require time to consider your proposal. You have 1 hour, Sarah replied.
After that, this system becomes very dangerous for anyone who profits from the suffering of innocence.
The communication channel went silent as the Korath cut their transmission. Commander Veltar looked up from his tactical display with amazement.
Guardian, I'm showing massive fleet movements throughout this sector. Word of your broadcast has spread beyond the ships currently in this system.
Military vessels from at least a dozen major powers are moving toward our location. Are they hostile? Sarah asked. Unknown.
But preliminary communication suggests they're responding to your call for a Guardian protocol. It appears you may have just started the largest multinational military alliance in galactic history. Sarah slumped into a nearby chair, suddenly, feeling the full weight of what she had set in motion. A simple act of maternal protection had somehow evolved into a potential reshaping of galactic politics. Mother Sarah, Kes said softly, moving to stand beside her chair, are you frightened by what you have begun? Sarah looked down at the young NYTH, then, at his siblings, then, at the faces of hundreds of refugees throughout the medical station who were watching the viewscreens with hope for the first time in months or years. Terrified, she admitted honestly. But, sometimes being terrified is the price of doing what's right.
The Nest songs say that true guardian hearts are always frightened, Mira added.
Because they understand the weight of the lives they protect. But, they act anyway, June concluded, because fear is not as strong as love. Sarah reached out and gathered all 3 cubs into a gentle embrace, careful not to disturb the medical equipment that was still keeping her alive and functional. Whatever happens next, she whispered to them, remember that you are loved.
Remember that you have value.
Remember that there are beings in this galaxy who will stand between you and any danger that threatens you. In the depths of space around them, dozens of fleets held their positions while their commanders waited to see whether this moment would mark the beginning of a new age of galactic cooperation or the start of a war that would reshape 3 sectors. The next hour would determine not just the fate of 3 small refugees, but the future of every innocent being in the galaxy who needed protection from those who would exploit their vulnerability. Sarah Chen, xenobiologist turned guardian, held 3 children in her arms and waited to see whether love and sacrifice could triumph over greed and cruelty. The universe held its breath and prepared to find out. The hour passed with agonizing slowness. Sarah remained in the command center with the 3 cubs, watching the tactical displays as ships continued to arrive in the system. What had started as a potential rescue mission had evolved into the largest gathering of military vessels in recent galactic history. Commander Veltar provided regular updates on the growing fleet compositions. Altarian Defense Force has committed 12 battlecruisers and 36 support vessels. Centauri Federation is showing similar numbers. The Rigel Cooperative has sent their entire third fleet. What about non-military vessels? Sarah asked. 17 different species have dispatched hospital ships and refugee transports. It appears they're prepared to begin immediate evacuation operations if needed. Dr. Zephi approached with his medical scanner, conducting another examination of Sarah's vital signs. Your stress levels are approaching dangerous thresholds, he warned quietly. Your body is still adapting to the resurrection process. Too much strain could cause cascading failures. I'll rest when this is over, Sarah replied, though she couldn't suppress a wince as another wave of pain shot through her nervous system.